Well, thank you for having me, Peter, and always a privilege to be on a panel with Dao Wei to talk about U.S.-China relations. And some of the things you've just said, Peter, I think are representative of what I heard recently and, of course, over the past year from experts in China. But I think things do look very differently from the United States. No doubt in the first year of the Biden administration, the U.S.-China bilateral relationship has been rocky. The U.S. has rejected the past framework for the relationship, which it essentially sees as no longer relevant, and it's trying to establish a new equilibrium in the relationship. And I think that's very much a work in progress and remains to be seen whether they can succeed. But it's no secret that Beijing did not expect the Biden administration would inherit and then build on the tougher policies of the Trump administration. The degree of continuity in U.S. policy on issues such as tariffs, which you just mentioned, but also the South China Sea, Taiwan, and even Hong Kong, I think wasn't anticipated. And we have seen President Biden put an even greater emphasis on human rights, and I think that was also unexpected. So as you say, yes, there was this definition that was introduced by Tony Blinken, I think, very early on as competition, confrontation, and cooperation. But the emphasis has unquestionably been on competition. The administration deliberately sequenced its priorities. And that began with a focus on reinvigorating the U.S. economy and U.S. democracy after the Trump administration and the January 6th episode. And strengthening U.S. alliances and partnerships globally. And those were the two priorities. And then that came before engaging with China. And as you heard from U.S. officials, the plan emphasized dealing with China from a position of strength. So what may have appeared to you to be a first 6 months of somewhat quiet, the administration, yes, was focusing on other things because it really didn't want deep engagement with China early on. Beijing, of course, has remained unwilling to accept a framework for the bilateral relationship that focuses primarily on competition. And after an effort to persuade the U.S. to agree on a common descriptor for bilateral ties, I think China has abandoned this effort, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. If they have, I think it's a wise decision. The Biden administration views the U.S. and China as essentially locked in a structural long-term competition between a rising power and an established power that have very different systems. And you heard, of course, in his State of the Union address last year, President Biden talked about autocracy versus democracy. That is sometimes referred to as a Biden doctrine. And the competition is increasingly multidimensional. So it's not just along traditional terms such as economic competition, military competition. It's about technology, and it's about ideology and political systems. So after two relatively unproductive meetings in Anchorage and Tianjin, there were some positive developments. We had the working groups were stood up between China's foreign ministry and the U.S. embassy. They made progress on some issues, visas for journalists and detainees and exit bans. The Meng Wanzhou case was resolved. The U.S. and China signed a climate change agreement, proving that limited cooperation is indeed possible. And then, of course, came the virtual meeting just a few months ago that improved the atmosphere of the relationship. I think that the meeting also restored confidence in the importance of symmetry between leaders. And it created the opportunity to move toward what I think is the objective of the Biden administration, and that is competitive coexistence.